Remote work, hybrid work, the great resignation, quiet quitting, synchronous and asynchronous. So far, the 2020s have been quite a decade for challenging where, when and how we do work. And now, with the explosion of AI in the last year, we're getting a glimpse of the tools that may turn work change pressures into a long-term reality where work changes for good. One of the biggest newly reinvigorated ideas about how work can be meaningfully different is the 4-day work week. To understand where a 4-day work week might fit into the history of how we structure work, it's important to understand where standards like our current 5-day work week come from. Would it shock you to know that in the US at least, it's actually 85 years old this year? In 1938, President FDR signed into law the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA. You'll know it from the posters you see in every workplace, which established a national standard of a 40-hour, 5-day work week. Since then, the vast majority of countries have followed suit, with few being seriously out of step with this standard. The first standardisation of a working pattern came thousands of years before this though, in ancient Rome, where farmers and artisans would work 10 days and then take off an 11th day to come to market to sell their goods. They would also take time to be involved in religious practices. So this isn't exactly the free time weekend we now think of. In the mid-18th century, the Industrial Revolution seriously boosted productivity, but also brought workers together in a way that hadn't been necessary before. In England, which is a traditionally Christian country, mill owners would offer Sunday off as a day of religious observance. But not all of the workers used this time for piety. Some had more hedonistic intentions, and often Mondays would also get missed due to the ill effects of their partying, like hangovers. To compromise, the mill owners allowed a half day off on Saturdays as long as the workers arrived ready to begin work on Monday morning. So the 2-day weekend that's more familiar to us was born, and the term weekend was first seen in use in 1879. I'm not sure if this was also the year someone came up with the term Sunday Scaries. On the other side of the Atlantic, 2-day weekends had also started to appear, but were not the norm. And on the days at work, workers might be working 12 or even 16-hour shifts, despite protests and legal efforts to solidify 10 or even 8-hour workdays. Henry Ford is credited with many things, but did you know he really was the foundational factor in us having our current workweek arrangement? In his assessment, promoting a 5-day work week, where workers got paid similarly to what they had for a 6-day week, was an important step in growing the middle-class customer base for products like his. So he made this change in 1926. Strikes, protests, and even violence had sought reductions to the average working day in earlier decades, but through the 1930s, with the Great Depression, working hours decreased significantly as having more workers employed but with shorter hours was a means to reduce unemployment. So this was the journey that led up to FDR signing the FLSA into law. Given that the history of industrialisation only dates back a little over 250 years, 85 years without any significant change in the expected working patterns is pretty astonishing. Particularly given that through this period we've seen dramatic worker productivity increases, which in the past had been seen as a good reason to reduce working time in order to avoid increasing unemployment. Many leading economists of the time predicted that work time would continue decreasing. John Maynard Keynes predicted we would now be approaching a 15-hour work week that would suffice to accommodate delivering our material needs. But the fact is that few of these historical figures predicted what we now see. With productivity increases soaked up into monumental corporate profits, unemployment kept at bay through wage stagnation, and decreases to the real-world purchasing power that was important to building Henry Ford's middle-class customer base. Over the last few decades, a clamour has reappeared, again demanding that the status quo of how and when the majority of us works changes. Enter the 4-day work week. Now, many of you may already have people in your companies who work a 4-day week, but in general, up until now, these have been compressed schedules where a person works their 40 hours just with 4 10-hour days instead of 5 8-hour days. The 4-day workweek being proposed is very different, as it shaves 20% off of the standard work week, both in terms of hours and days, with 32 hours or thereabouts worked over 4 days with no reduction in pay or benefits. A good portion of you probably think this is a crazy idea, but it's pretty much what Henry Ford instituted when he formalised the 5-day 40-hour work week for much the same pay for his workers who had been working extended hours over 6 days. No one can argue that this change was a dire impediment to Ford's success, which became, and remains, one of the world's largest automakers globally. The similarities between then and now, though, are immense, as Ford was reaping the benefits of revolutionary leaps in technology connected with what most people were doing, making things, whereas now we see that technology revolution in a new area, information work. The 4-day workweek is not a new idea. It goes back decades, and in recent history there have been experiments with it by companies such as Microsoft. But interest in it was renewed during the pandemic, and over the course of the last couple of years, many companies across the US, Ireland, the UK and elsewhere have been trialling this approach, in some cases with pay for the 5th day being subsidised as part of government programmes. What has been found from these trials has been astonishing. In one recent global study of over 30 companies and with nearly 1,000 participants, revenue was actually seen to increase 8% versus pre-trial 5-day working. On top of those positive business results, 97% of employee participants wanted to continue on their 4-day work week rather than going back to 5 days. Employees also experience less health issues, less burnout, and more positive feelings towards retention. So, as has been the case before, that changes in how we organise work are inherently linked to developments in technology, so will be the case now. The Romans made changes based on agricultural technology, the Victorians based on industrial technology, Henry Ford in connection with the production line, and now, today, our communications technologies and the power of AI will enable the next big shake-up in how humans relate to work. Increasingly, those businesses that have utilised technology to enhance the employee experience are those that have been able to hire and retain talent through the upheavals we have seen since 2020. But this hasn't been as simple as just rolling out technology. Success has also come by being clear in how to use technology and what expectations are. For example, for hybrid workers who may be operating asynchronously. A tool like Microsoft Teams can reap incredible benefits, but only if there is common understanding in how those tools should be used, and particularly how out-of-hours use should be handled. But slowly, Microsoft has been catching up with these now common issues. You may have noticed, for example, that Outlook prompts you to think about sending your messages during business hours, and Teams lets you delay your messages until later. These are technology solutions to the very human problems our different ways of working have created. And as time goes on, developments in these software will reduce the complexity of the rules and guidelines companies need to put into place to protect how they want to work with these new tools. Alongside this, we are now seeing a whole new class of tools that are to do with aggressively amplifying productivity. Microsoft has announced Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is going to bring helper AI to pretty much every corner of Microsoft's products. With this, and the new efficacy we are seeing in platforms like ChatGPT, the average user is going to start to see products available to them that can realistically turn hour-long projects into minutes of work. However, whereas Microsoft initially sold its Copilot tool as something that would broadly shake up work, with its recent announcement of an over $350 per user per year price tag, it's possible this hype won't soon make its way into every type and level of office worker. For any technology to broadly impact our working lives, it must be used broadly enough to have such an impact, and the biggest barrier I can see here will be the cost. In manufacturing, we have seen technology change how jobs work. Roles that made things are now roles that manage machines that make things. We are perhaps at the start of that same process in the office, that those who best know how to maximise the output of the AI tools available will be in greater demand than those who know how to do the things we are asking the AI to do for us. For smaller businesses, there may be a clearer path. Those businesses that have a clear digital transformation strategy with an ability to keep an eye on what's coming over the horizon are going to be much better placed than those playing catch up. I see businesses who were reluctant to adapt to the changes we saw during the pandemic that continue to have far greater issues in their hiring and retention than their competitors. As the demands from workers for workplace change become more deliverable because of technology, those who fail to adapt will be left further behind and perhaps just unable to catch up when we see the impact of AI truly start to kick in. Ultimately, I'm not sure whether the 4-day workweek will win out, and if it does, we should remember it took over a decade from Ford's adoption of a 5-day workweek to FDR signing it into law. But we can all agree that there continues to be big pressure on businesses to change how work works. And when we see results from trials into changes like 4-day working, like those I mentioned, it's difficult to dismiss these demands as unfounded. We are asking people to operate in new ways and be connected to an extent that has never been the case before. This is a huge experiment on what the human brain can handle, and data points like increases in burnout and depression cannot be ignored. Technology gives us the opportunity to do more better, to do more with less, and to do more for our people. This is an opportunity we shouldn't pass up, and those who ignore it potentially do so to the long-term detriment of their businesses. With all that extra time you're going to have with your 3-day weekend, you're going to be able to watch a lot more YouTube videos. So remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you get the best possible content for your Friday binges. So I guess this video was a little different today, but I hope it contained useful information for you. What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching to the end. Until the next one, bye bye.